What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the College Football Show here on the Post-Gazette Sports Now YouTube channel. I am Noah Hiles. He is Andrew Destin. We are your college athletics writers for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. And Andrew, we made it through. The 2022 college football regular season is complete. Penn State finishes 10-2. Pitt finishes 8-4. Overall, pretty solid season, I think, for both the teams we cover.
Yeah, couldn't agree more on that. And certainly, if you're a Penn State fan, this probably exceeded your expectations a little bit. And if you were a Pitt fan, maybe halfway through the season, you were a little disappointed. But Panthers ended the year riding high with those 4 straight wins. And really, for both programs, I mean, they ended their seasons on strong notes in what, for many other programs across the country, has been a crazy year of college football where the end has seen slips and slides and all those sorts of things and crazy changes of the rankings. But if there's anything you can say about Penn State and Pitt, they finished the year strong and they took care of business when they were supposed to. So they avoided the plagues of what was, in my opinion, an awesome college football season all around.
Yeah, a great season. I think the only thing I would say on for both Pitt and Penn State, I think both fan bases would be a lot happier if they both just got one more win. If Penn State had beat either Ohio State or Michigan, even though it wouldn't have been in the Big Ten championship and it wouldn't probably still be in the mix for a playoff spot, it'd be, maybe just on the outside a little closer. I think fans would just be happier that they have that to hang their hat on. And I think if Pitt would have had just one fewer loss, or if I know for a fact, if it would have just lost one fewer game, if it would have beat North Carolina, it would have been in the ACC championship game this weekend. And even if it didn't beat North Carolina but tied and UNC had the tiebreaker, I still think a 9-3 season would be a little bit aesthetically more pleasing than an 8-4 season, which Pitt fans have seen now. Pat Narduzzi, I believe this is his 5th 8-win season in his 8 years there, which is consistent of anything. So on that note, Andrew, at the end of each semester, at the end of each year, when you're in school, one thing that always comes out are our grades, report cards. How did your report cards look when you were in college? Did you get good grades, or even in school, just in general?
Yeah, I have to say, I'll admit that I was a little bit of a nerd back in college, and any of my friends who from my college days and high school days listening to this will know that I was too much of a study geek. So I'm one to admit that, unfortunately.
I couldn't have been further from the opposite. I knew what I wanted to do when I was about 12 years old, and if anything I was learning didn't directly pertain to what I wanted to do, I could not invest more than just knowing that, like, I just need to get about a B so my parents won't be mad at me. And like, I was just in high school, I was, a little bit better than just a B average, but in college I just knew, I'm like, if I just hover around that 3.0, sometimes I'll be a 3.1, sometimes I'll be a 2.9. No angry calls or texts. Like, they know the drill. Like, I was more focused on the student paper and the radio station, and you know, both paths seem to work because we're here. So let's go ahead and give our grades, our report card for Pitt and Penn State. We're going to give out 4 grades: the offense, the defense, the special teams, and the coaching. And we'll start with the offense. I'll go first. I'll give Pitt and its offense. I'll give it a C minus. This is a complicated grade when you really think about it, because there was one part of the Pitt offense which was fantastic. Its ability to run the football was lights out. They had the ACC's leading rusher, first team All ACC running back Israel Abanikanda, who was phenomenal. I mean, he did a great job game in and game out. And then in the games where he did not play, Rodney Hammond Jr. looked great against Syracuse. He looked great against West Virginia when Izzy wasn't really clicking. And really the only game, I believe, I think there were only 2 games where they didn't have a 100-yard rusher, and that was the West Virginia game where Rodney ran for 90, and the Georgia Tech game, which they didn't have Rodney or Izzy, and they were using, Vincent Davis, who I think ran in somewhere in the 80s, but fumbled the ball a couple times, and they stopped giving it to him. So run game was great, pass game not great, but I will say they did have a 1,000-yard receiver in Jared Wayne, only the 11th 1,000-yard receiving season in the history of Pitt football, which is kind of shocking considering how many great wide receivers have played at Pitt throughout time. But so I guess you can't dock them too much for that, but I do think had they had a better passing attack, this team is without question playing for an ACC title. So I'll give them a C minus on the offensive end. Andrew, what do you give Penn State?
Yeah, for me, it's a B plus. This was a team that kind of exceeded expectations in that regard, and I'll talk about these two guys a little bit more, and probably a lot more as we proceed. But the two running backs, Katron Allen and Nicholas Singleton, freshmen who really exceeded a lot of expectations. They came in with a lot of hype, but they carried this offense in a lot of ways for a unit that last year didn't have an 100-yard rusher in any game, a streak that dated back to November of 2020. They hadn't had an 100-yard rusher. They did that multiple times this year. But the reason I knocked down the offense a little bit is because two reasons. One, the inability to be particularly effective against a team like Michigan, where, once the cards are all stacked and it's good against good, Penn State didn't quite match up in that regard. And you're always going to be left wondering, I think, with this season of the what if at the quarterback position, because Sean Clifford did a lot of what was expected of him, but he also kind of took some steps back in a lot of ways. This was not as pass happy of an offense, and he didn't perform quite as well. He threw more interceptions this year on much fewer passing attempts. He was a little bit more accurate with the football, but they weren't as explosive. And without Jahan Dotson, that downfield passing game really took a blow. It was just not the same team throwing the ball vertically down the field. That's coupled with, they're a much better running team, but it wasn't as good of a compliment as it could have been. And that's what leads me to the point of what if with Drew Aller, because the offense was good, but it wasn't in that A range. It was a few notches below just based on its performances against the truly great teams, and Clifford stepped back a little bit this season.
All right, so we'll move over to the defensive side of the ball. Andrew, what's your grade for the Penn State defense?
Yeah, for the Nittany Lions, I'm going to go A minus, and really tip the hat to Manny Diaz in his first year as a defensive coordinator, a guy you're pretty familiar with in the ACC side of the ball, but now first year at Penn State, and there were some growing pains initially when he was at that first game against Purdue. Boilermakers got a lot of offense. There were games like the Michigan game where Penn State's defense gave up, over 400 rushing yards, and you're thinking 5-6 games into the year, what does this team have? But the last six, the Nittany Lions finished really strong, some really standout players, and some big building blocks to move off of moving forward. And guys like Joey Porter Jr. really stood out this year. And next year, you return some standouts like Kalen King at cornerback, Abdul Carter at linebacker, the freshman sensation this year. So a lot that's really, really interesting stuff. So I would say that this defense, in a lot of ways, did exceed expectations down the stretch. Early on, it looked like a B minus type of defense, but it really took the next step those last 6 games. How about you for the defense?
I same A minus for Pitt's defense. I believe it leads the nation in sacks right now as we get entered conference championship play. So finish the regular season leading the country in sacks, or if not, they're close to it. I haven't checked the total recently, but I mean, my metric here is I think that had Pitt just received average quarterback play, there's a chance it's undefeated this year, or at the very least, it maybe loses to Tennessee because Keaton got injured. But I think they probably win all 3 of their ACC games that they held a lead in the second half in, if they were just able to continue moving the football and not putting their defenses in places to fail. I think the defense got better and was continually put in those tough spots in the month of November, but didn't fold. In October, there would be turnovers or there would be short fields that they had to deal with. And it would just kind of be like, well, what do you want us to do? Like, this is too much. And in November, it doesn't matter anymore. We're just going to take the game over. I mean, they almost outscored the opposition in the month of November, Pitt's defense. I believe they scored, I think, 4 touchdowns or something along those lines. They had a safety. They had like 20-something sacks. It was an incredible final month of the year. But even, I mean, you look week to week, I don't think any team has defended Hendon Hooker's offense at Tennessee better than Pitt's defense did in the second half of that game in week 2. There was just so many great performances, great individual efforts. I mean, 7 of their 11 starters received all ACC recognition. That's a great defensive unit. And while some stats might necessarily not back it up, I just think, that a lot of their shortcomings were due to the struggles on the opposite end of the football. So I give Pitt's defense an A minus. It was lights out this year. Moving forward, special teams, not going to spend a lot of time on this one. I just give a D. Pitt special teams are bad. There were good moments. I think Ben Sauls, the kicker, got a lot better this year. He missed 2 kicks against Tennessee, where if he makes one of them, they probably beat, the Vols at home. And Narduzzi even said that. But The week after, he missed one against Western Michigan, and then he didn't miss again. So he was perfect from field goal in ACC play. And I believe, or no, he might have missed one against Virginia that was like 50 something yards. But aside from that, he was lights out. Didn't miss an extra point all year. So I give him props. MJ Devonshire was top 10 in the country in punt return yards. That's worth noting. He did return a punt for a touchdown, but the punt game was horrible this year for Pitt. They, continue to use 2-3 punters a game because they can't really trust one of them. They've had 3 punts blocked. There's always penalties on 4th down. It's just a mess, and it's something that frustrated the entire staff this year, and it's almost cost them a couple of football games. So I give a D for special teams. Andrew, what's your special teams grade?
Briefly for me, a B minus. A lot of good things. The punting game, it was a big thing. Was, hey, are they going to be able to replace Jordan Stout, who's now doing it at the NFL level? And I'd say they did so pretty well with Barney Moore. He wasn't the same, but he did a good enough job there. And Jake Pinniger winning back the starting job after losing that out last year to Stout, who was kind of their do-it-all guy just because of how talented he was. Pinniger did a good job there, not great. Definitely didn't finish the year the way he wanted to with 2 misses inside 40 yards, but the reason I really knocked down this grade is just because of the kickoff game, similar to what you mentioned with the punt game there for Pitt. Penn State was rotating guys through the first 6-7 games of the year before they landed on Pinniger. And the knock on him throughout his whole career was, well, he doesn't have a strong enough leg to do kickoff. It's not that he's going to kick it out of bounds. He's just not going to get it deep. And he didn't kick it out of bounds like the other guys they tried did, but a lot of times the kicks were short. And it never came back to bite him. Nobody ever returned a kick for a touchdown this year, but it felt like every time there was a kickoff, somebody was returning it for the other team. So you keep doing that enough times, eventually you're going to get burnt. But yeah, can't knock on it too much in that regard. It's more the overall play. And then in the punt return game, nothing really doing there. They had one kick return for a touchdown by Nick Singleton, but overall, good, not great. That's why I give him the B minus.
All right, and finish us off with coaching grade.
Coaching grade, I got to give credit where it's due to James Franklin. B plus, came into the year saying that, I'm not going to credit the offensive line. I'm not going to make these bold statements. He didn't come in with the wild, high-flying expectations or setting those expectations, and that started back at Big Ten Media Days in July. And he really let his team prove it this year. And, there were some mistakes, some things that I still question. I feel like in the Michigan game, he really got out-coached by Jim Harbaugh. In the Ohio State game, I thought there were some things that Penn State could have done differently. But overall, kind of got to compliment him on the year. I think a B plus is a pretty fair grade. But how about Mr. Narduzzi? What are you giving Pat?
I'm just gonna give the staff as a whole a B minus. I think when you lose games the way Pitt lost, I think everyone deserves blame, including coaches. They blew 3 second half leads in their 3 ACC losses, and part of that goes on coaching. I don't know if you can blame Pitt for maybe not considering changing quarterbacks. Because I think that maybe would have helped, possibly giving someone else a look in certain games. But maybe Slovis truly is the best they have to work with, and that was the right move. But just other situations, I think the play calling earlier in the season kind of hindered where the offense was in October because they were so conservative. They weren't ready to really throw the football when they were facing real secondaries. I think that kind of hurt. Just a couple of other personnel decisions and everything. I just think that, there were just so many little errors that prevented this team from being a 9-10 win football team and playing for another ACC title. And I think the 2 fingers you point at here are offense and special teams, and not much was done to change either one of those. So you got to dock the coaches for that. We'll move on now to superlatives, Andrew, and we'll fly through these here. We don't need a lot of analysis or whatever. We can just give them real quick. We have 5 superlatives: MVP, most improved, best performance, best storyline, and best quote. So let's go through them right now. I'll start off. MVP for Pitt. I'm going to go with someone a little different than what others are thinking. I'm going to go with Servassier Dennis. Just the captain of the defense, middle linebacker. I think that his role, I've been adamant saying this all year, he was probably the most irreplaceable player on Pitt's team, where if he were to go down, it would be very hard to find someone to fill in his spot, whereas, other guys went down and they got production. I just think Servassier Dennis, production-wise and leadership-wise, was the catalyst behind Pitt's strong finish in November. So I give him the MVP. Who's your MVP, Andrew?
Could have gone defense like you with Jair Brown, but I'm going to keep it a little mainstream here and say the two running backs, co-MVPs, Katron Allen and Nick Singleton, both did great things in the running game, reignited that. Pretty clear MVPs for me. The two of them combined for nearly 20 rushing touchdowns. So give me Allen and Singleton.
All right, most improved. Who do you got?
Most improved, again, it's kind of an interesting answer, I guess you could put it, but I'll go for a whole position group in the offensive line. That's something that's been criticized for years here in Happy Valley for its ineffectiveness and inability to run the ball or protect the quarterback. If you go back to the Christian Hackenberg era, this is the best that it's been in a long time here in State College. So I'm going to say the offensive line took a huge step forward as a group this year. How about you, Noah?
I'm going to go with, this one's easy. Israel Abanikanda asserted himself as one of the best running backs in the country after, being in a rotation, being the starter. But this year, he was the best running back in the ACC. And for my money, is an All-American. I think he is that quality of player. Best performance, I'll stick with Izzy. Hard to look past this one. 6 touchdowns, 300-plus yards on the ground. Broke Tony Dorsett's single-game rushing record against Virginia Tech in Pitt's lone win in October. So I'll go with Izzy in that one. Best performance for a Penn State player, Andrew.
Going to stick with the running backs, Nick Singleton. It was when he kind of jumped onto the stage, and it wasn't a particularly huge game, the Ohio game, but he had 10 carries for 179 yards, 2 carries of over 40 yards, and 2 touchdowns. That really set the stage for this guy's legit, that this run game has a chance this year. That was the first sneak peek to it, and that was really the best rushing performance any one player had for Penn State this year. So that was a sneak peek into what was going to be a pretty special year for the Nittany Lions running the ball.
Best story or storyline? So either something you wrote or just something that you continue to follow this year for Penn State.
Yeah, best storyline for me has got to be the emergence of Abdul Carter. He became one of the best players on the team, and he's drawn a lot of comparisons from players and coaches to Micah Parsons at that linebacker position, which, as you and I know, lofty praise, deserving of every ounce of it. What an impressive freshman year. He's a guy I highlighted back in the summer as a potential breakout guy, and he did that and more. So Abdul Carter was a huge storyline for me. What was the best one for you, Noah?
I think my favorite story was actually one that I did on Pat Narduzzi when Pitt played Rhode Island, his alma mater. I got to talk to, some people that he played college football with, some of his closest friends, and learning what a young Pat Narduzzi was like. It really helps you understand how this guy is able to be so dedicated to the craft of coaching football because he was born to do it. So that was a really fun story. And best quote of the season. Now, I don't know if any stick in your mind. Narduzzi's given us a couple of great ones. I might actually do a whole story on that after the year is officially over. There was one he said his center Jake Cradle Saturday had swamp butt and he needed some Depends. But I think just edging that out was against Western Michigan right after the win. The first thing he talked about was a horse crap police escort that the team had received from their hotel to the stadium, and he was mad that the police escort would stop at red lights, which allowed Western Michigan fans to throw beer bottles at their bus. And Narduzzi said, I expect that when I'm in Morgantown. I don't expect that when I'm at Kalamazoo, Michigan. And that quote's great. But what's even better is the fact that Narduzzi's never coached a game in Morgantown, West Virginia. So, there was just so much about it. Pitt won by like 30. He's like going on this rant about something that happened like 5 hours ago. And that was just Pat being Pat. So what's your best quote, Andrew?
Best one for me is one from Devin Ford, who no longer a member of the program, the running back. And this was from a question I asked him back in September. I asked him why he was still part of the program, and kind of put it bluntly there because there was a lot of running back depth with the new freshmen, as I mentioned. And he told me at that time why he was still part of the program was, what Grandma instilled in me is you finish something that you start. I got that one thing on my mind. I got to do everything I can to get the best out of this school and get the school to get the best out of me. Unfortunately, Devin Ford ended up leaving the team a few weeks later, right? Just like blatantly went against what he said. But that's so the nature of college football now. And that's
right.
Kind of what that takes me to is that, in the era of the transfer portal, in the era of high stakes recruiting, it's now become such a sink or swim thing. And Devin Ford was a big rotational back, had a lot of value in the passing game, and was big in their win against Purdue. When it came down to it, he was like, hey, I have eligibility that I can use at other places. And if I keep playing this year, I lose another year of eligibility, or I can just redshirt this year and retain it. So that just shows you the nature of college football. Guys think highly of themselves, but there comes a point where now with the transfer portal and with NIL, this is a very quick to change world, I guess is the best way of putting it. And I thought that quote exemplified perfectly how crazy the college landscape is now.
Grandma don't matter that much, I guess. So,
That's
all
tough.
right, we'll move on now to our third and final segment. College football's championship weekend. We kind of talked about it on the last show how this one isn't as exciting. I personally seem to think that 3 teams are locks. I think that if you get to conference championship weekend unbeaten and there aren't a ton of one-loss schools waiting behind you, I don't think if you lose, I think if you're undefeated and you lose one game in conference championship weekend, you should not be replaced in the playoff by a 2-loss team. I think that that's fair. So really, I think that the only team that can replace anyone in this field is Ohio State. That would be fair. I don't think Bama deserves to be in it this year, or Tennessee, or LSU, or any of those other programs. So you seem to agree with that, Andrew. I don't think we need to expand further upon that. So let's just go through our picks of the 6 conference championship games, and then we'll give our Final Four playoff format as we wrap up the show. Pac-12 championship, Andrew, who do you got?
Give me USC. It's tough because I really like Kyle Whittingham. I think he's the best or the second best coach in the conference. The problem is he's going up against the other guy in Lincoln Riley, and USC wants revenge. They took him to the brink last time out in Utah, put it on a neutral site. USC's playing for a college football playoff spot. Give me the Trojans.
Here's the thing about the Pac-12. It loves to eat itself alive, and Utah normally plays a big factor in that. I feel like the Utes always have that one win in late November or December where it kind of screws the conference out of getting a playoff team. I see that happening again. I'm going with the Utes in the upset on Friday night in the Pac-12 final. We move to Saturday now, Big 12 final, and I'm going with another upset. I'm going Kansas State. I think they'll keep it close, and I do still think TCU gets in, but it's hard to beat a team twice. Kansas State, it's Super Bowl. I think TCU is going to play hard because it doesn't necessarily feel like it has a guaranteed spot, but I think that TCU will still probably be in if it loses a close game here. Give me the Wildcats. What do you think, Andrew?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with your assessment. I think, for one, I do think Kansas State gets the upset. I like what Will Howard's done as a backup quarterback in replacement of Adrian Martinez. And I also think that, to your point, it's really hard to beat a team twice. It's why I got USC beating Utah. It's why I got Kansas State beating TCU. And Horned Frogs really shouldn't be penalized if they lose this game. They should be in. They're undefeated. Let them in. And if you put in an Ohio State team over them, not sure I'm a fan of that one. But,
No, I completely agree. SEC, who do you got?
this is tough. Yeah, give me Georgia and give me them covering that one too.
Yeah, I haven't even looked at the line, but yeah,
Oh, it's big.
I'll take whatever points you give. Yeah, Georgia in a blowout. I think this is probably the most evenly matched game of the weekend, even though it's like probably the most inconsequential. UCF versus Tulane for the ACC title, or the AAC title, excuse me. I'm going to take the Blue Wave. I think Tulane's had, probably its best season in forever. I like seeing some different stuff, and I think that Tulane has been fun to watch this year. I think it finishes off with a conference title.
I'm riding the wave, and if we're doing teams based off of who they beat and opponents head to heads, hey, they beat Kansas State earlier this year, and Kansas State beats TCU. Call Tulane the Big 12 champion. That's where I'm at here.
Put it in.
Ride the wave. Give me Tulane.
All right. So, Big Ten championship, Andrew. You've seen both of these two teams play. I don't think this is a hard one to pick, but Michigan or Purdue?
I don't think it's a hard one to pick. However, I do think Purdue will actually put up a fight for a good chunk of this, and that's not because I don't think that Michigan is good or they're not as good of a team, because we saw what they did against Ohio State. I think it's more the style of football Purdue plays is similar to Ohio State in the sense that it's throw the ball around, get to your guys in space. So I think Boilermakers keep it close for a little bit, but Michigan by a couple of touchdowns probably late.
Yeah, I just think Michigan is really good, and it's just gonna keep rolling. I think they're really trying to make a statement that they're the top team in the Big Ten right now. So I'll take the Wolverines. Final game, ACC championship, Clemson versus North Carolina. I'm gonna go with the Tar Heels. Both of these teams are playing horribly right now. I mean, you had one guy who had a chance to win a Heisman if his team just didn't lose out, and it did. And then you had Clemson, who probably would have been in the playoff had it just not stunk down the stretch, and it did. So I'll go North Carolina. I just think it has the better player in this matchup. But again, I personally think right now at the end of the season, the top two teams in the ACC are Pitt and Florida State. And I don't think either of them are in the ACC final. So just goes to show what kind of year this conference has had. Andrew, what's your pick?
Yeah, I wish I could pick Mike Norvell's Seminoles, but can't do it this time. So I'll ride with you with the Tar Heels as well. Definitely not a good end of the year for Drake May and company, but I like Drake May. So give me him against Clemson. And that team to me, the Tigers, they really haven't impressed me all year. There hasn't been a single game where I've said that's a definitive quality signature win. I mean, come on, they should have lost to Syracuse at home. Like, we can go down the list.
Right.
Give me the Tar Heels.
Yeah. So, Andrew, as we wrap up, give me your college football playoff field of four here.
Gonna go with one that's kind of intact right now. Georgia, Michigan, TCU, USC in that order, 1 through 4.
You think TCU stays at number 3 even with the loss?
I think so because I mean that's tough because I'm picking them to lose. So I guess I could see it flipping USC and TCU, but right now I mean that's just kind of what's in what's chalk. So you know what? Why not? You've convinced me. I'll flip USC and TCU just
All
because
right.
I'm saying conference champion over a non-conference champion.
Fair enough. I'm gonna actually go a little different here. I think we'll go Georgia number 1, Michigan number 2. I think with USC's loss, 2-loss team, you're out of the playoff. Ohio State will slide into the number 3 spot so they can get that Ohio State-Michigan rematch in the semifinal there, and then TCU will move down 1 spot after losing to Kansas State, but still get in at number 4. So we'll have Georgia, TCU, Michigan versus Ohio State, round 2 for the 2 college football playoff matchups. That's our show. Andrew, any final thoughts as we wrap up?
Just that I like your prediction a lot because that means Penn State could be heading out to Pasadena. So I'm not going to say it. I'm not speaking it into existence, but if you are, that works for me.
Yeah, I'll do it. I have nothing to gain or lose from it. Thank you all for watching this season. We'll have probably 1 or 2 more shows here with the bowl schedule coming out and everything. We'll obviously have college football coverage during bowl season. Be sure to read that. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and keep tuning in. We'll keep bringing the content here on the Post-Gazette Sports Now YouTube channel.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you liked the video, please like it and subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you enjoyed it on Apple Podcasts, please rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. For 6 months of digital access to post-gazette.com for just $6, click the link down in the description.